Thank you, Mr. Acting President. Yes, I want to start off my debate on this subject with a letter from a constituent, Mr. Ronald Elliott, one of the many emails I've received on this subject, but I just thought I'd read his short email, and it goes like this. It is disturbing that in 2019 we are required to provide a case to Parliament in defence of unassigned green open space and its inherent value. In an age of life-threatening atmospheric, ocean and environmental degradation, species extinction, diminishing open space and overpopulation, surely that much is self-evident as we try to save the former gas and fuel land in Highett for public use. After a 60-plus hour working week, we desperately need the simple respite of Sunday at the park and the luxury of offering weary adults 5 minutes of peace, sanctuary and rejuvenation. Silent beyond the trains, background traffic, wind, bird, dogs and kids running riot in an unstructured, spontaneous play for a couple of hours. Please consider the thousands of flats around Highett where people live, part of our community. Treasure the scarce remaining green open space. They do not have trees or gardens, they just have a balcony if lucky. No, it's a very intensely developed area around this area. I know it well. The land on Nepean Highway, on the border of my electorate, has been rezoned now by the Planning Minister to allow residential towers as high as 26 metres. Now this site was always marked out for development, as Ms Taylor says, going back a long way, and there was provision for heights there. I understand the original DDO had a height recommendation of 4 storeys, about 13.5 metres I think. But I ask, in the imposition of the 26 metres now by the government, what consultation has taken place with the community on this new imposition of intense development there? With Melbourne's exploding population growth and rampant loss of public land, our public open space is one of our most scarce, valuable assets. And I go overseas, I went to Singapore, and Singapore's famous for intense development and apartment lifestyles. And I just wondered what gives Singapore that quality of being a pleasant city despite the towers is that they have got open space. They've made provision for open space, unlike the way we have approached land development in these inner suburbs, where we've tried to keep little pockets of open space and expanded the population enormously. And this is a case where we have one huge chunk of 6 hectares of open space. True, there's room for development there, but this is probably one of the worst cases of a greedy overdevelopment, and I think with a meagre provision of 11% of the area for open space, it would hardly pass muster if it had to go to council or VCAT in the normal way of a normal development, a private development would. This site, located near Southland Shopping Centre, could be a remarkable community asset. It could be used as a park, sporting grounds, or ecosystems for families to escape the hustle and bustle, walk their dogs, let their children play. It's absolutely necessary in this area of intense development. Instead, the government wants to strong-arm further residential development into our suburbs to the detriment of residents. The Minister's told the media that the proposal has been through a rigorous planning process to ensure the local community were able to have a say on their preferred outcome. Yet, since canvassing this issue, I'm yet to find anybody who supports the use of the land in this way. And Ms Taylor says as a community she gets to know, and as a councillor in a community, she gets to know what they like and what they don't like. Well, I've certainly heard about this development and people don't like it. I've received many, many emails on the subject. I haven't heard of one resident who supports it. So, yes, I don't think there's been anywhere near the proper sort of consultation on this proposal. I think on the original structure plan, there may have been some consultation, but this is a state-owned asset, and here is the opportunity to mix a good development, not a greedy development, not 89% of the land covered with intensive apartment development and greater heights than was originally planned for. I note that the state opposition, and I thank Mr Davis for his contribution this morning, especially those figures on the scarcity of open space in these highly developed areas, but I note that the state opposition in their election promises pledged to transform the gas and fuel site into a park and 3 sports fields. 3 sports fields would be a fantastic boon to this area, because I know, as a councillor and now as a representative in that area, the trouble of trying to find sports grounds for kids to play on now. The competition is so intense for the small pockets of open space and parkland that's there. It's really almost impossible. Even putting lights in and having people playing at night, there's not enough sports fields to go round with the increasing density in those areas. That would be a great boon for the community. The Pennydale Resident Action Group, President Derek Screen, says the area already lacks community facilities and believes that this sell-off would be detrimental to the community. Now, I tend to support his judgment in this issue as a member of the local community more than the Planning Minister. The Planning Minister has required a mere 11.6% of the site to be used for open space. Not enough. To his credit, 10% of the new development is to be affordable housing. That's great that he's imposed that on the previous plan. But considering that the government owns this site, I think they could set the standard, which we'd like to see for development, of something like 25% being required for community housing. And the government could achieve this. It's just through chasing the dollars that they're not. And there's also, Ms Taylor mentions the amount of money that they've spent on remediation there. Well, that's only the start. There's a lot more remediation to be done. And they're talking about this site being worth $500 million to them, and they've spent $26 million so far. It's not much of an investment, but to whoever takes over this site for developing it will have to spend a lot more money on remediation. Now, unfortunately, and this has happened on a lot of these industrial sites through that area, our environmental controls in the past were not great, and there is significant pollution on a lot of them, and this is one of them. As a member of Sustainable Australia, one of my core policies is that planning powers must be returned to local communities. Well, we're a long way from this at this moment. Here the Minister has seized control of this site, which the government's owned, and made pretty lax requirements for the owners to meet community standards, council's previous height controls, and showing any sign of generosity to the surrounding residents. From what I've observed, the community doesn't want this development. That you drive down the Pearn Highway between Cheltenham and Highett, and you'll be blown away by the number of residential buildings propping up in this area. Very intensely developed already. And traffic congestion along the highway is already a nightmare. Parking at Southland Shopping Centre is spiralling out of control, and shopping is spilling onto residential and streets to find parking spaces in this area. And another high density development is only going to exacerbate the issue. And I don't know what Ms Taylor was saying about car parks. I don't think there's any plan to have car parking as part of the plan for development in the area, but certainly parkland would be what we'd be chasing after, and we want to see more of that. She talks about taking the burden off smaller streets. Well, there's just more and more burden being put on this area, and they were saying this area should take more and more people with less space, less open space, more people. Kingston Council has had their population targets up from 24,000 people to 28,000 people. They're currently growing, they estimate, by 2,063 people per year. Now that's in there. The government sets every area a population target to deal with this self-imposed problem. Ms Taylor says this will be a terrific solution to the population problem. It's a self-created problem, and then they go around trying to jam more and more residents into more and more developments to deal with their own problem of creating this, welcoming this population growth in an attempt to reap money from land sales. And here, not only reaping money from the transfer duties, but they're reaping money from selling off an important public asset. Now, the state government should be doing more to support the health and well-being of residents, and green open space is one of the things that's been shown in many, many studies of city development as something that's crucial to the health of a city and the health of their residents. This is what helps combat mental illness and physical illness in our community. Residents need open space and green area. They don't need high-density residential development putting further pressure on their suburb. And to have the government coming in and saying, let's have higher and higher density and less open space, I think we should revoke this and go back to the drawing board and involve the community on a real consultation, and the government should be far more generous in its contribution to the community down in the southeast there. So I will support the motion. Thank you.